First of all, thank you very much for coming on today. We're going to be talking about derivation and presentation, storytelling with data science in the business environment. So here's the deal. Here's all of us right here, right? And we have this thought bubble above our head. And inside of our head, we have this beautiful picture. But how the heck are we going to tell people about this beautiful picture? I could say mountains, green, trees, but they're not going to see this, what's inside my head. What we're going to be talking about today is getting this beautiful picture and the audience that you're trying to communicate with. What you want to do is you want to get this beautiful picture inside of their heads, right? But unfortunately, there's communication barriers. This is the real world. This is your verbal talk. This is your presentation. There's barriers getting your picture inside of their head. So what we're going to be talking about today is, one, how to find this beautiful picture. Where does it come from in the first place? But then two, how to remove these communication barriers to get the beautiful picture inside your audience's head. Because if you're not careful, they're going to get some sketch-looking doodle mountain art green. You know, it's not going to work out for them. And they're not going to get the message that you want them to see. All right? Awesome. So introduction. So who am I? My name is Greg Kamradt, and like Jared said, I was a part of Galvanized Data Science Immersive. I was there from April 2015 to July 2015, so almost a year ago, a little more than a year ago. And right now, I'm at Salesforce on their product data science team, and specifically within their strategy and growth team. And it's been a great time. What are we doing here? So I have a deep, deep down belief that we can all be data superman and data superwomen. I do. And the only thing that's stopping us from becoming these data super people is a simple awareness of the tools and process. It's simply knowing the program, the process of doing these cool data insights and communicating them to your stakeholders. So to put this a little bit more succinctly, here's what I learned in technical training. Here's what I learned at Galvanize. Here's what I learned at my entire coding experience. And then I took that, and here's what I've learned at Salesforce. Here's what I learned on the job, and what we're going to go over today is combining these two. Simply, the two puzzle pieces coming together. Because what I found out immediately is that the world is a lot different than the technical training. That's simply a tool to get your message across to the business stakeholders. Because run the coolest algorithm you want, at the end of the day, if it's not driving value, then that's simply all that it is, a cool algorithm. All right? So presentation tomorrow, overview. Basically, with this presentation, I'm telling you to take this material, use it as a guideline for yourself, alter it, digest it, and make it work for your specific situation. So one of the lessons I want to say today is, whenever you see a presentation, it's not the source of truth. It's a guideline for you to take, digest, and make work for your specific situation. And throughout this presentation, we're going to have a couple different, we'll call them not key points, but notes. And so we're going to have main topics and takeaways, interview tips and questions, rhetorical questions, direct questions, and additional goodies and resources. After this, I'll have a link for you guys where you can download extra material for presentation resources and everything. Schedule, we're in the introduction right now. We're going to jump into a derivation portion, and then finally we'll jump into a presentation portion. So let's jump into it. What is data science? Data science is a lot of things. And over the course of my short data science career, I've learned that data science, it's a marketing term, is what it is. And what you need to understand is that there's a lot of words around it, but at its core, saying you do data science is like saying you do art. It's like, what does that mean exactly, you know? To your grandma or to your mom, saying you do art, oh, that's cute, that's awesome. To a real data scientist, someone who's doing it in production in the world, telling them you do data science, they'll say, oh, you know, cool, cute, that's awesome. But one of the main takeaways we're going to get from here is saying you do data science is like saying you do art. When I think of data science, what comes to mind for me is turning insights into action. So really, the data scientist is the vehicle between the data and getting business value out of it. And then finally, data science creates data science products. So this is when we're talking about tools in production. So we're talking about Spotify's recommendation system, Pandora, Facebook's image recognition. But then ultimately, data science is necessary for companies to stay competitive in the future. Now, this is the first time that we've talked about companies in data science, or using data science to drive business value. And I know what you must be thinking, Greg, I thought data science was going to dataset.io, downloading the SF crime dataset, opening up an IPython notebook, importing sklearn, presenting via matplotlib, and writing 200 function line, undocumented, uncommented code that nobody's gonna be able to read on GitHub anyway. I thought that was data science. True, yes. That's usually what it looks like between you and your local machine, but in the real world, it looks a little bit different. So the role of data science in business. One, easy, maintain a competitive edge. It's one of those things where everybody's doing it. Everybody's taking advantage of the new tools and processes that we have to get their competitive edge. We're getting into a world, well, we've been into for a while, but simple stats aren't working in the business world anymore. That's where the data scientist comes in. That's where this new computational power comes in. And finally, the ultimate goal with data science in business is to prescribe actionable change. So as a data scientist, our ultimate goal is to prescribe actionable change, which means you've made an impact on either a product roadmap or a business decision, or you helped a product manager with the decision that they have. But ultimately, the world is different because you interpreted the data a certain way and presented it a certain way. And obviously, things get complex. That is where the data scientist comes in, because as we know, there's three parts to the data scientist: the technical aspect, the math and stats aspect, and then finally, the hardest part is the business domain experience and understanding what the heck your stakeholders want. All right, so now as a general outline for how a data scientist's time is spent in the real world, I split it up into three different parts here. First, you have your data quality, prep, planning, and gathering. Think of this as like the data engineering aspect of it. Finally, you have your presentation and communication portion of it. I mean, do all the cool stuff you want, but if you're not giving it to somebody else in a digestible manner, it's not going to go anywhere. And then finally, a common misconception is people think that the third pillar would be algorithms and things like that. Let's not get that fancy. It's analytics is what it is. And when we talk about the analytics portion, what I found is that data science, it's only about a third of your analytics portion. So when I'm interviewing people, I'm doing phone screens and I'm hearing all these things, people are always pitching to me, Greg, I'm a data scientist, I'm this good at data science. But there is so much more to the job than doing some cool algorithm, all right? Now, this is a very general model. If we split this up into the different types of data scientists, you have your data engineers, you have your machine learning experts, you have your visualization people, and then you also have your analytics managers. Different positions will have different thirds of this bubble or of this distribution. Different people will do more data science than others in the algorithm sense or whatever. But the main key point here is we all have the same goal, no matter what kind of data scientist you are. And let me even abstract it even further up than that. These are all data people, you know what I'm saying? They take the data and they're a medium to get business value out of it. So our goals as a data scientist. One, we got to ramp up quickly to get in the shoes of our external stakeholder. Whoa, Greg, external stakeholder? What the heck is that? It's somebody who needs to use the data, because in a business, the data scientists aren't the one managing the products of the go-to-market. They're not the ones coming up with new features necessarily. There's exceptions, obviously. But data scientists are used as a medium for the data into the business value. Next, the goal of a data scientist is to do data science through a business lens. So what that means is you're not just going off and doing random forest on some data set for the heck of it, because you're not getting paid to do random forest on a data set for the heck of it. You're getting paid to get business value out of the data. So you really have to optimize where your time is and do trade-offs. Finally, this is so huge, you have to communicate these results effectively, because it seems like you have all the time in the world to present to your external stakeholder, but in actuality, you have their attention for 5, 10 minutes, maybe 30 minutes for a meeting. If you're not communicating your results effectively, you're going to be in trouble because they're not going to get your idea and you're not going to complete your goal, that very end process of being a data scientist. And then finally, I said it once before, but prescribing actionable change. We're going to go into what this means, but one of the keywords here is actionable. It means somebody else can do something with the data. Usually a project manager, a VP, an exec, they're not going to sort through the data. That's what we're here for as data people. Cool. Rhetorical question. If you think about it, what is your goal when you start any job? I mean, really, before you start any job ever, you want to put value into the business. And you want to prescribe this actionable change. You want to make an impact. And that's what we're going to learn how to do, is how to make an impact as a data scientist. So data science projects. To start laying out the outline for the rest of the day, we'll go into this briefly, but very roughly, you have your hypothesis or goal, you have your data, and then you have the tool you're going to be using against it. What we learn a lot in technical camps or these technical boot camps is we're going to learn about the data. We're going to learn about the data science toolkit. That part's covered. That's good. There's some very, very good resources out there for us to become knowledgeable about these aspects. What we have a harder time with is this hypothesis or goal. And to formalize this process a little bit more, we look at the data science project timeline. You acquire your data, you prep it. This is where you clean it. This is where you cleanse it. You analyze your data, and then you act upon your data. Splitting this up into two different parts, if you think about it, we have our conclusions, which is on the left-hand side. We have our conclusions, and then we act upon our conclusions, right? Split this up into the day. We split this into two parts. One is the derivation portion of it. So this is doing data science. But like I said before, if you just do data science, it's not helping anybody out. We have to present this data science. We have to present our findings. This is where the communication aspect comes in. All right? Put it one more time. Like I said before, you have your ideas for a hypothesis in the middle. Finally, you get to your main points or your takeaway or your conclusions. And finally, you have your communication. I want you to notice that I haven't said anything about an algorithm or computational power or some crazy data set that's 20 bajillion rows or something like that. It's because that stuff doesn't matter, really. What matters is you have the data and you get your business insight out of it. Split this up again. Derivation, the part before you get your main points. This is doing the data science. And finally, the part after you do your data science. This is the presentation aspect of it. So derivation, obtaining or developing something from a source or origin. Awesome. And then presenting, a manner or style in which something is given, offered, or displayed. Putting it one more time, I love this analogy. We're going to go over a couple analogies today. I love this one. Is you have an arrow, and if we split this arrow into half, you have the weight or the wood of the arrow, and then you have the part that drives the point home. You have the arrow part of the arrow, I guess. These are two little action figures here. We have derivation beforehand. So this is the weight of your presentation. This is the content. This is the material. And then finally, you have your communication aspect. This is the presentation. This is the part that drives the point home. So the derivation is the good content. The presentation is your awesome delivery of it. We'll go into these main points. I'm not worried about them right now. We'll go into each one. But for derivation, we have ramp up. We have a feedback loop. We have prescribing actionable change. For presentation, we have starting with main points. I love this one. We have tune, tone, and abstraction. I extra love this one. I'm really excited to go over that. And finally, we have our preparation and understanding common curveballs. Cool. So let's talk about derivation. Like I said before, finding our mountain. Derivation is how do you find your mountain? How do you find your cool content? How do you find your material? Derivation is doing data science through a business lens, but on the exact flip side of that as well, it's doing business through a data science lens. And that's why data scientists are so valuable, because they have two sides of the same coin. A lot of business people, they'll be domain experts. They'll know the business like the back of their hand. Data scientists have a hard job because they require both the technical aspect and the business aspect. Derivation, 3 main points, let's talk about these. Ramping up. So this is when you get into a new project, or this is when you get into a new company or a new industry or anything like that. And there's 3 main parts of ramping up. There's your overall business goals. There is your external stakeholders' goals. And then finally, there's your project goals, all right? So when you talk about overall business goals, this is figuring out how can you contribute to the overall business and the overall, the entire scope of the business. Because a good data scientist won't have a narrow project scope. They won't say, this is my project, and then I'm all done because this is all that's asked of me. They'll look at the entire holistic picture and figure out how can they contribute to the overall goal. So the way that I like to think about this is through a couple examples here. If I'm going to start at Lyft, I'm not just going to go into Lyft HQ and sit there and look at the data and not understand it. If I'm going to go into Lyft, I need to get myself ramped up with the business. I need to feel where the data is coming from. So I need to drive for Lyft. I need to take an Uber. I need to take a Lyft ride, Lyft line. I need to be a passenger for Lyft. I need to try to recruit drivers, and so I know where the heck this is going. You see how we have the whole holistic picture just for Lyft here. Imagine how powerful that data scientist will be rather than somebody just sitting in front of an Excel document. Stitch Fix, I need to subscribe to their clothes. Shoot, let me go to the warehouse, let me package up a few of these clothes, and let me see the entire process so that you start to have a holistic view about what the world looks like for that particular company. Finally, Postmates. I need to order a burrito from the Mission when I'm sitting in North Beach so I can see how it goes. I need to drive for Postmates, and so I can see where this data is coming from. So now when I have a column in my table and it says rides completed, I won't just know what that means through text, I'll feel what that means. Imagine how powerful that data scientist will be. Finally, next you have your external stakeholders. So this is when your project comes around. It could be a project manager, it could be a VP, it could be an exec, but within the company, everybody has different goals. It's very, very important for you to understand what is the goal of the person you're presenting to. Because once you know that, you can do your analysis. You can do your analysis with that in mind and maybe even go a step further. Because they might tell you what they want, but if you know what their overall goal is, you can contribute in such a larger way. And finally, we're into project goals. So project goals, usually the way that goes is, you have your scope, you have your project, you have your meeting, and somebody says, Greg, give me some data, I'm trying to do this. Cool, sounds good. But really what they have is an overall main goal. And so to get to this overall main goal, there might be 5 or 6 projects that come along with it. For example, Greg, we're trying to figure out why users are churning. Okay, so let me look at the days active for a user and see if I could use the number of days active they were in the previous month to see if they're going to churn. Cool. But they're not really trying to figure out how users are churning. They're trying to figure out how can we get more users. And they think users churning is one of the symptoms of it. So what you'll have here is you have a whole bunch of different projects. And they'll all be sub-projects and they'll all have sub-goals. The reason why you guys are going to be such cool data scientists is because when your goal comes around and your project comes around, because you did your ramping up, you're going to be able to put your project in terms of the main goal. You're not just going to stop at the scope, but you're going to understand what you're being asked, and you're going to do your project with the overall main goal in mind. So yes, usually how these presentations goes, you'll answer their question, cool, and then right after that, you'll say, well, I know you're interested about this too. Here's how it relates to the larger picture. Because your external stakeholder, 95% of the time, they have the bigger picture in mind. And they need help completing their bigger picture, but they're only going to tell you a sub-portion of it. Cool, feedback loop. This is all about not doing too much work before you have to. If I ever start doing too much work and it's unvalidated, like I'm unsure if I need to do it, if I'm writing this big, long script and I'm not even sure if I need to complete it, I'm not even sure if my stakeholder is going to want it, then you're starting off the wrong way. What you need to do here is you need to find the signal in the data. So the way you find signal is through validation with your external stakeholders. It even starts with a hypothesis. Why do all the work? Why do 2 hours worth of work in an IPython notebook to come to some conclusion if you can just go to your stakeholder in the first place and say, hey, I have this hypothesis. Would it be valuable if I put in the work and I found this out? They might say, sure. If they say they don't care about the hypothesis and they really would like to rescope the question, good thing you didn't put 2 hours of work into it. You know what I'm saying? So this is about getting the feedback loop. This is about testing the message here. And usually, the way that I know that I found signal in my projects is this last bullet here, is the signal answers, so what? There's so many times I'm looking at presentations and a slide will pop up and somebody will say, and I was thinking to myself, so what? Okay, but so what though? You just showed me this cool graph, but so what? What am I supposed to take away from this? Signal, usually the data will look like white noise. This is how it usually goes. Next thing you know, out of this white noise comes a couple clouds. And then finally, as a data scientist, when you know you're onto something cool, I know you guys all know this feeling, the clouds, they start to turn into a little something. And there's a heart right there because a heart feels good when you find the data in it. You know what I'm saying? I'm looking for a word to describe that, but so many times I've looked at a data set and seen something awesome, and it's like, that is why I'm a data scientist right now, because we just found out this really cool thing, and I cannot wait to go present this. So the feedback loop, like I said, you have this hypothesis. Don't go put in a bunch of work until you know your hypothesis is validated. I'm not talking about finding out if it's right or wrong. I'm talking about if anybody will care even if you find out your hypothesis. Because nobody cares, then why are you doing it in the first place? Then you're going to go collect your data. You're going to work on your one goal that we were talking about. And then you're going to go with that one goal. You're going to go test the message. Hey, am I going the right direction? Because the last thing you want is to spend 2 weeks on something and to have your external stakeholder tell you that they don't really care too much about it. Cool? Next, we'll move on to prescribing actionable change. Your job isn't to show a graph. It's to instill change. Actionable change. What does it look like? It looks like when you have a product roadmap that you're helping solve or lay out, and it was set out one way, but because of your data insights, you literally changed their roadmap because of these cool data insights, all right? And this is, actionable change looks like advising your stakeholders. So a lot of people, when I talk to them, they think data science is just answering questions and all these small things. But once you get into advising, that's like the upper level of data meta-ness. Like you can predict stuff, but if you can advise the business based off of the data, that's where you want to be. That's where the ultimate goal is as a data scientist. And like I said before, if you can't answer a so what about your insight, a so what about your bullet point, a so what about your slide, then how does it help the goal and why should anybody care about it? I'm going to harp on this a couple times here. I'm going to present it a couple times. Your job isn't to show a graph. Your job is to guide a business decision. A lot of people, they'll just show a graph for the heck of it. And like, cool, it's pretty, sure, Seaborn, Matplotlib, D3, sick. But so what? So what about it? And finally, at the end of your derivation, you're going to have your main points. And the way that this works is you're going to finish with bullet points. So if you can't write down your main conclusions in bullet points, then it's going to be too complicated to present to any of your external stakeholders. If you're making a cool visualization, a cool tool, sure. Like that one SF housing with the blowups and the foreclosures and stuff, that's cool, it's awesome, it's visual. But in a business environment, they don't need something like that. They need to make a business decision here. And what's cool about finishing with bullet points is you can't BS the results. Because after each bullet point, you look at it and you say, so what? If you can't answer so what about it, then you got to scrap that bullet point and put it somewhere else. So at the end of your data science presentation, it's like, oh shoot, I'm done. It's awesome. It's great. Well, no, unfortunately you're not, because you still have to present this information. You have your cool bullet points, but without the proper ship to guide it into your stakeholder's mind, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to sit with you. Jared, how are we doing on time? Awesome. Now moving to the presentation aspects. And so now at this point, we've done our cool data science. We have our main points. We have our external stakeholders' goal in mind, and we're going to knock it out of the park. But we need to communicate it to them somehow. So like I said before, with bringing it back to this original analogy, we're going to talk about how to remove these barriers now. This is the presentation aspect of it. When I say presentation, usually presentation is slides. But if we abstract it all the way up, presentation isn't slides. It's getting my message into your head. So sometimes people do that through art, through a song, through a speech, through slides. They do it through a video, through a lesson, through a tutorial. They do it so many ways. abstract it up, and realize that I'm not saying presentation is and it has to be slides. I'm talking about getting something inside your external stakeholder's head. So what is presentation? Presentation is communication. Bring it right around. Communication is presentation. Abstracting it up, getting inside what's in your head to somebody else's head. And what's awesome about this is how these two are connected. Derivation ends with main points. Presentation starts with your main points. Starts with main points. Here are the 3 points. Let's do one more. Oh, after this, I forgot to mention, there's going to be a whole bunch of resources you guys can take home. So I'll put a link up here. You guys can grab them. There's a bunch of goodies in here. I'm excited to get over to you. So presentation starts with the main points. So your main points are your bullet points, and then the voiceovers, these are your subtle points. This is when you show either a graph or a main point, and then you have your voiceovers as an accessory to these points. Like I said before, it's easy to spot the BS in your main points after you get your derivation portion out of the way, your data science portion. And finally, this introduces a iterative presentation style. What I'm telling you right now is you start any presentation, any visual endeavor with these main points, and you get an iterative presentation style. So like I said before, this email pitch, this is my pitch to do this talk at this conference. I said, hey, here are the main goals. I didn't show any presentation, any slides, anything. I tested the message and I said, hey, would this be a cool idea? I got a good response, and they said, yeah, sure, let's do it. So my presentation started with this email pitch. And next thing you know, then we start working on the visuals, because that's where all the work is put into. When I go about designing a presentation, start off with the main points again. These are the bullet points. So if I were to put this into like a building analogy, this is when you're doing your very rough design outline, your very rough blueprints. Test the message, see if it's working. Next, we'll go into the more detailed concept design. This is when you do your slide titles and your supporting bullet points. See, there's no visuals here at all, and there's no graphs here at all. After we're jogging, we're doing some walking. So this is when you start to put in your graphics and your theme. But along each of these ways, you've tested your message with your presentation, so you know you're on the right track. You've validated with your external stakeholder to make sure that you're on the right way. After you're walking, you're doing the cosmetics. This is your voiceovers, this is your transitions, this is your animations. And finally, the last one is what I like to call Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, because this means, it made me think of that scene when he's over the grass, like looking for everybody with a microscope and going over each fine-tuned point. That's when you do all the final touch-ups to your presentation there. So tuning, tone, and abstraction. This is my favorite part, so get ready. Abstraction. This is getting into just the right level of detail. Another analogy, another metaphor here is the pot isn't too hot, the pot isn't too cold, but the presentation is just right. The level of abstraction is just right. Pablo Picasso. He is a master at abstraction. We're going to go into one of his paintings here, and we're going to talk about what it means to abstract up when you're talking about a data aspect. This is his bowl series. How many people have seen his bowl series before? We have un, deux, trois, quatre. We have about 7 of us. What we have here is, what do we have? That's 11 versions of the same bowl, but they're at different levels of abstraction. What that means is in this first bowl at the top right, there's a lot of detail in there, and it is a bowl, but there's a lot of small, minute details in there. As you move down, it becomes a stick figure. It's still a bowl, but it's at a different level of abstraction. Let's put this into a data aspect. When you do your data project, this is where you sit, because you know all the data. You're intimate with it. You know the columns. You know the algorithms. You know the inner workings. Great. Your boss is a little out of the details, so he's going to be a little bit lower. He's going to get that it's a bowl, but he's not going to be in the level of detail. Now, when you start presenting this to other people, you have your technical people. They still get a lot of the detail, but they're still going up on the abstraction. Finally, or next, you have your department VP. So imagine this is the VP of analytics. He gets what you're doing, but he doesn't need all the details. He needs a bowl, but he doesn't need the details of the bowl. He can only take on so much. Next, we have our execs. These guys are really high level up here. And finally, you guys understand this, but then you have one more. Come on now. Then you have the public. If you try presenting any data to the public ever, you need to simplify it as much as possible. So the public sits out here at the very end. So the main topic and takeaway for this, communicating effectively is about finding the right balance between information given and abstraction. So here you're not giving much information, but you're still succinctly telling people that it is a bowl, and they get it, but they don't need all the detail. Let's put this into an actual data problem here. So the first level of abstraction. Oh, you have this matrix graph. Doesn't this graph look cool? First of all, yeah, but so what? How do you want somebody to digest that? Nobody's going to be able to look at that. Okay, cool. Let's break it down a little bit. The interdependent relationship between the 5 comical variables is really cool. It's like, yeah, you have one graph, but how the heck is somebody supposed to digest that? Okay, let's break it down just a little bit further. Let's abstract up. Let's still show our bowl, but let's not show as much detail. If you look carefully, you can see my point in this graph. So you get it. You'd be very surprised as to how many people show stuff like this. It's ridiculous. All right, let's break it down even further. Let's abstract it a little bit further up. Our KPIs have been growing in a linear fashion for the past 4 quarters. All right, so I'm starting to get a little bit about what you're trying to tell me. Cool. If I'm trying to tell you that our KPIs are growing, do the axes matter? Do the data points matter? I mean, not really. I'm not trying to tell you that February was, 405 or whatever. I'm trying to tell you that we're up and to the right. Let's break it down even further. So we've been growing month over month due to these 3 factors. Sweet. We've been growing due to these 3 factors. And there's a graph, no axes, because the axes don't matter, the data points don't matter, cool. But then what I'm trying to tell you is, what I'm using this graph for is to send a message to you. Who says I have to show you a graph? You know what I mean? If we abstract this up even further, why don't we simplify it? We're growing, here's why. I mean, you guys laugh, but what I'm trying to tell you, I'm trying to help you make a business decision. I need to tell you that we're growing, and here's why. And then there's a thumbs up, because we're casual. It's cool. It's good. The picture instills a lighthearted image in your head, and it's not so businessy. They remember this stuff. So we're growing. There's the main message. Here's why. I didn't need a graph to tell you that. So when we talk about abstraction, think about when you're about to put in a graph, it's like, okay, cool, but so what? What are you trying to really tell me? Tone. So tone is general character or attitude. These are the most polar tones I could think of. That's why they're up there. SpongeBob, Bueller, and your grandma. So pictures and voice. I love putting pictures, and I love having a lighthearted tone with my presentations, because a lot of people have this expectation about what tone needs to be. And I'll tell you right now, tone needs to be whatever the heck you want it to be. It's your voice. It's you. There's no business tone. There's no presentation tone. There's no data tone. I don't need to flash fancy words in front of you. What I love this last bullet point here. Your audience doesn't need a 2-inch drill. They need a 2-inch hole. Your audience doesn't need a graph. They need the insight from the graph. All right? So pictures getting the point across. I love pictures and presentations because they add a ton of emotion to your presentation. The first one on the right, this is a great presentation from a galvanized employee, and it says, a perfect storm of supply and demand when talking about data scientists. She could have put that up against a blank slide, but now we have George Clooney, and I forget the other actor's name, in Perfect Storm, and they get the emotion. Things are getting real. It's getting crazy. The next one, the kid, it's just the beginning. Where's the kid running to? Where is he going to? The beginning of what? What's he going to do in life? Who's he going to grow up to be? It inspires so much more than just saying it's the beginning. And finally, preparing to fail. Preparing to fail. Someone's about to have a bad day. And you get that message because I'm showing you a tanker about to tip. All right? It's easy to do this. You throw up a dramatic picture. You throw up one line. Maybe you throw up 2 lines. And then you throw up some dramatic text right after that. It's easy. It's really not that big a deal. So keep in mind that pictures are okay with data, and they help get the metaphor across. And you've seen here, we've talked about a lot of pictures here. Metaphors and analogies are great because they attach your message that they don't know your data message, but if you attach it to a concept, whether it be pictures or an analogy or Picasso, then it helps guide it into their mind and helps them digest it a little bit more. So don't be afraid of metaphors and analogies here. We use this in the real world. Leaky bucket. Easy. New users are going into a leaky bucket, and churned users are coming out. It's a metaphor, it's an analogy. It helps my business partner understand what the heck is going on. So when we talk about presentation and anticipation of curveballs, there's a lot of things that happen when you're on fly with the presentation. It could be you needing to practice and review your slides. You're showing your team members a sanity check. This is the feedback loop we're talking about here. And finally, we're talking about these common curveballs. We have our time pressures. You're giving a presentation, the next thing you know, there's 2 minutes left. You have your unexpected questions. You have your stats ready. So people are always going to ask extra questions. You have your stats. They aren't in the presentation, but they're in your notes ready to go. And then finally, the ultimate way to get rid of any question is say, hey, let's talk about this later. Because you don't want to answer a question you don't know in the presentation. You said, let's talk about it offline. And part of what you guys are going to get later is a bunch of common resources and mechanics. These are slides I'm going to give you guys right after this presentation. We'll leave this slide up. And got some cool points here. You guys will all take this home. It's absolutely no big deal. And finally, the last thing I'm going to leave you with is talking about making your audience jump. First thing that came in mind for this was our boy Neo jumping over the building and failing the first time. If you make your audience jump too much in the presentation, they're going to fall down. What you want to do is you want your presentation to be a little hopscotch. Tell your audience to jump to 1 to 2 to 3 and 4 to 5 to 6 and 7. You're guiding their mind throughout the presentation. All right? So like I said before, we have a bunch of good resources and goodies for you. I put the Snapchat logo because you can actually scan a QR code of Snapchat. I didn't know that. I know you all have Snapchat, so it's all good. And there's a URL up there if you guys want it for all the resources. Thank you very much.